Well, hello. We are going to speak today about the two lines of thought that crossed over the late 20th and the 21st century. And those are postmodernism and postcolonialism. You know, postmodernism has to do with a way of perception very different from that of modernism, as it comes after the war and the Great War, the Second World War, the bomb, and so notions that could be safe, like truth or one or death, are not so clear anymore. Justice, love. So things began to change, perceptions began to change, multiplicity appeared, multiple ways of loving, multiple ways of truth, multiple ways of seeing things. Everything is possible, everything is, so we are like a big world inside a very changing world with very few certainties. We have no country, we have no origin, we are citizens of the world. Of course, this will change in postmodernism and globalization. So the moment today, going back to nationalisms little by little, but postmodernism tends to see the world as one. Computers, the internet changed everything. So no place, no belonging. Everything is like unfamiliar, untime, and so you live in a world that can be deceptive in many senses. Parallel to this, we have post-colonial literature. And in the case of post-colonial literature, we have a very clear notion of origins and family, the body, the color of your skin, where you belong and where you don't belong, trying to belong, trying to be separated. In different periods of post-colonialism, we are going to go through that later. And so, there's a very different way of seeing the current times from a postmodern and from a post-colonial point of view. I am writing a book right now on post-colonial literature. And I have been working with the difference, especially with the difference between postmodernism and postcolonialism. And I will present that mainly from a very important debate from two critics that are representative of each current. Linda Hutcheon, the postmodern Western Linda Hutcheon, and Bill Ashcroft, the post-colonial creator of The Empire Writes Back. So I am going to read some quotations I have here in my computer. So I look aside because I will read, and I'm recording with my phone, and my quotations are in my computer. So I will read for you some quotations that hopefully will make clear this debate, this important debate between Hutcheon and Ashcroft. From Linda Hutcheon's very famous article, Circling the Doubt Spout of Empire, postcolonialism and postmodernism, I bring for you a quote to get to understand what the debate is about. Hutchins says, I have deliberately included here writers who would be categorized by others as either post-colonial or feminist in preference to the label postmodern. While I want to argue here that the links between the post-colonial and the postmodern are strong and clear ones, I also want to underline from the start the major difference, a difference post-colonial art and criticism share with various forms of feminism. Both have distinct political agendas and often a theory of agency that allow them to go beyond the postmodern limits of deconstructing existing orthodoxies into the realms of social and political action. While it is true that postcolonial literature, for example, is also inevitably implicated and, in Helen Tiffin's words, Helen Tiffin is an author who wrote with Ashcroft The Empire Writes Back, informed by the imperial vision, it still possesses a strong political motivation that is intrinsic to its oppositionality. However, as can be seen by its recuperation and rejection by both the right and the left, postmodernism is politically ambivalent. Its critique coexists with an equally real and equally powerful complicity with the cultural dominance within which it inescapably exists. End of quote. So Hutchins is setting as the main difference between postcolonialism and postmodernism the political aspect. She says that postmodernism is rejected by both the left and the right. I really do not agree with that, because the right is clearly part of postmodernism from the very beginning. But for all the rest, except for the agenda, she says that the different similitudes are perceptible or obvious. So what she finds, the main true difference between postmodernism and postcolonialism is for her the irony. So she says irony is the trope that really mark the difference between postmodernism and postcolonialism. For her, postmodernism has irony in itself, and so I will read the quotation for you to see. Besides the formal and thematic, again from the same book, besides the formal and thematic areas of mutual concern that I have already mentioned, there is what could be called the strategic or rhetorical one, the use of the trope of irony as a doubled or split discourse which has the potential to subvert from within. Some have seen this valorization of irony as a sign of the increasing purchase of post-structural codes of recognition in Western society. This is from Slevman Postcolonial 157. But post-structuralism can also be seen as a product of the larger cultural enterprise of postmodernism. In either case, though, as a double-talking, forked-tongued mode of address, irony becomes a popular rhetorical strategy for working with existing discourses and contesting them at the same time. Its inherent semantic and structural doubleness also makes it a most convenient trope for the paradoxical dualities of both postmodern complicitous critique and post-colonial doubled identity and history. And indeed, irony, like allegory according to Sleman, has become a powerful subversive tool in the rethinking and readdressing of history by both postmodern and post-colonial artists. So again, I have named the trope of irony as postmodern, but then Hutchon is saying that post-colonial literature has this same trope in common with postmodern literature. So again, the duplicated truth, the duplicated reality, she sees that as part of both postmodern and postcolonial. Bill Ashcroft really disagrees with Hutchon. He gets very angry with Hutchon putting at the same level both ways of living life, of reading literature, of writing. On Postcolonial Futures, Transformations of a Colonial Culture, Ashcroft explains, I quote, "The conflation of postmodernism and postcolonialism is proposed nowhere more elegantly than in Linda Hutchon's Circling the Downspout of Empire. Although there is, says Hutchon, a clear emphasis on the political in postcolonial discourse, it can be seen as a version of postmodernism because of the trope of irony which both share." This is Ashcroft's excellent reading of Hutchon's ideas. Hutchon makes much of this use of irony, which he claims is a discursive strategy of both post-colonialism and postmodernism. Since then, Hutchon has produced a wide-ranging examination of the theory and politics of irony in Irony's Edge, which avoids, in the main, her earlier assertions of this link. My purpose, therefore, is twofold: to examine the genealogy of this notion that irony is the trope of our times, the category under which all doubleness can be subsumed, and to see how Keats's waited for the barbarians and in the heart of the country, while appearing ironic, clarify the tendency of post-colonial writing to employ other counter-discursive tropes such as allegory. What is at stake here, ultimately, is an understanding of how post-colonial writing might articulate the political future of postmodernity. However, my specific task is to demonstrate that the tropological strategies of post-colonial writing, indeed many of the major political energies of post-colonial textuality, are directed not towards a simple opposition in the dominant discourse, but towards a transformation of that discourse through the strategy of interpolation. Keats's work is strategic in this examination because it so manifestly typifies that body of contemporary writing over which post-colonial and postmodern interpretations appear to be in contest. So, as you see, Ashcroft analyzes Keats to show how different the trope of irony and the other three tropes can work in post-colonial and postmodern literatures. So I continue with Ashcroft. What is not immediately obvious about Hutchon's attraction to irony is that it has a venerable genealogy extending as far as Vico, reinterpreted through Kenneth Burke, Foucault, and Hayden White. This theory of irony is based on what may be called the tropological structures of discourse, which Fry and White elaborate as the great innovation of Vico. Vico's theory is that human society evolves through various stages which may be represented by the function of language within it, namely the dominance of one of the four master tropes: metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, and irony. This conceptual evolution corresponds to different stages of social rule as a dialectic of the exchange between language and the reality it seeks to contain. This is from White. Thus, the primal or metaphoric stage is that in which words and objects share the same essence. The transition from this stage to the next, metonymic stage, in which words stand for objects, is analogous to the transition in society from the rule of gods to the rule of aristocracies. The transition from metonymic reductions to synecdotic constructions of whole from parts, genera from species, is analogous to the transition from aristocratic rule to democratic rule. The final transition from synecdotic construction to ironic statement is analogous to the transition from democracies ruled by law to the decadent societies whose members have no respect for any law. Irony becomes, in a sense, the ultimate trope of modernity. This is Ashcroft. The trope in which the fragility of modernity's project of imperial regulation of human life is finally unmasked. So Ashcroft, to answer back to Hutton, takes the idea of the trope of irony, completes it with the other three tropes, and makes a parallel with politics. That is what post-colonial literature does. Okay, so to end this parallelism, I will read a final quotation, again Ashcroft, that explains, I quote, "The problem with the tropological model is that it can become endlessly protean, serving to describe or replace virtually any group of categories whatever." In his essay Foucault Decoded, White describes Foucault's epistemes, classical, modern, and postmodern, in terms of the four tropes, as a description of the ways in which the discursive practices within them make the phenomenal world available to consciousness. The linking of the postmodern with the trope of irony within this archaeology has become widespread, and it is precisely such a genealogy which allows critics, such as Hutton, to see irony as both the ultimate trope of modernity, the trope of the postmodern, and a trope conflating the postmodern and the postcolonial. In Vico's formulation, irony is the last stage of development, the stage of dissolution. This echoes Weber's view of the ambiguous nature of modernity in his classic study of the Protestant ethic. Rationalization makes the world orderly and reliable, but it cannot make the world meaningful. Yet, if irony is a stage of the dissolution of modernity, can it also be a trope of that which contests the major project of European modernity, imperialism itself? If post-colonial textuality exists in the stage of this dissolution, is it as agent or as object? Well, that's a very interesting question, which I work with in my book, that hopefully will be ready this year. So again, this parallelism between the postmodern and the postcolonial is in a way represented by the thoughts of Hutton and Ashcroft, who very differently think of irony. Hutton as the way postmodern literature understands the world and as a link between the postmodern and the postcolonial, whereas Ashcroft sees irony as the last of the four tropes by Vico, so the trope of the dissolution. Because in the 20th and 21st century, the late 20th and the 21st century, the best of the modern aims is dissoluted, is a fail, and democracies are also a fail. Well, so as you see, this is a very heat debate, a very interesting one, and we'll see how differently postmodern authors, we will read Barnes and Ian McEwan, and postcolonial authors, that we will read several of them, see the world, the same world, but seen from very different angles and perspectives, and taking as important things very different lines or points or topics, or else thinking the topics from very different angles. So this is what our course will be about this term, the differences and the parallelism between post-modernity and post-colonialism.